Now, are we called to fast? In Matthew chapter 6, you could turn there with me. Jesus is giving the Sermon on the Mount. He's talking about all sorts of things. He's talking about anger. He's talking about lust. He's talking about retaliation. He's talking about anxiety. He's talking about divorce. He's talking about marriage. And in Matthew chapter 6, the big things that Jesus is talking about, there's really two major things. He's talking about prayer, and he talks about generosity. But covered in between those two things, and a lot of people talk about the Lord's Prayer, which is in Matthew chapter 6, and the idea of generosity, right? Like, don't be anxious about tomorrow. Tomorrow has enough anxiety for itself. But stuck right in between those two things is actually 3 verses on fasting. Meaning, fasting is as basic to Christianity as generosity and communion with God through prayer. It's not for just the elite, special, super Christians. It's for all of us. Let's look at this together. Matthew chapter 6, starting in verse 16, it says this. And when you fast, these are the words of Jesus. And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. What's their reward? Jesus said it. They're seen by others. That's what they want to do. They want others to see how elite and great and spiritual they are. He says, no, but not for you. But for you, when you fast, anoint your head, wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Notice that Jesus doesn't say if you fast. What does he say? When you fast. Jesus clearly assumes we will fast. He also assumes we'll mess it up. And I just love the honesty here. There's an assumption in the same way that there's times when you're in prayer and you kind of mess it up and you make it about things that it's not supposed to be. And you start using words that you don't really know what they mean, but you start saying them because there's people around. You want to seem kind of spiritual. It's not really great. In the same way in which generosity is a real beautiful thing, but sometimes you give and the heart says, yeah, but I hope that they saw that. Or like, you know what I'm saying? The heart is a little bit off, a little bit. The same is true and can be true with fasting. So you can at times do this a little wrong. And Jesus assumes in the same way that you'll mess up prayer every once in a while or generosity every once in a while, you're probably going to mess up fasting every once in a while. But most importantly, what we see here is that God says he will be attentive when he sees us fasting, and in his attentiveness will reward our faithfulness in engaging with this practice. Matthew chapter 9 may be the most important statement in the New Testament on whether or not Christians should fast. Turn with me there. Matthew chapter 9, verse 14 and 15. The disciples of John have come to Jesus, and they're like, okay, I don't understand this. Why is it, here we are, the disciples of John the Baptist, right? Why is it that we're fasting, the Pharisees are fasting, and you're running around with your disciples, and none of them are fasting? That's not fair. You know, as Christians, we want things to be fair, right? You know what I'm saying? How come that's not fair? And basically, Jesus says, one day they will, but not now. Look at it real quick with me, verses 14 and 15. It says, then the disciples of John came to him, Jesus, saying, why do we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast? And Jesus says to them, can the wedding guests mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? In other words, are people sad when they're hanging out with the bridal party? Are people sad when the groom's in the room? Right? No, they came for the feast. They came to hang out. They came to have a good time, right? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast. In other words, what Jesus is doing is he's displaying again, he's giving it through an illustration. I am the bridegroom. I'm the groom. These are the brides. We are the bride of Christ. There will be a day in which they're not with me. And when they're not with me and I'm taken away, there will be mourning. But right now it's feast time. There's a lot of joy right now. And so because I'm here, there's no need to fast. But there will be a day I will not be here. Notice it says a day will come when he is taken away from the disciples. And when that day comes, they will fast. Not they might fast if they get around to it, or not they might fast if the church brings them through it, or not they will fast. Here we see that the primary reason to fast is to walk more intimately with Jesus. The disciples didn't have to fast. Why? Because they're with Jesus. Like, Jesus is their roommate. They're hanging with him. They're walking with him. Like, there's no need for us to enhance our intimacy with Jesus. He's right here with me, right? That's why there's no fasting in heaven. What is heaven? When we get to heaven, what is the first thing? It's a feast. It's the marriage supper of the Lamb, where we hang and chill, and there's going to be good food and good wine and good drink, and it's going to be wonderful. Fasting isn't about starving yourself. It's about growing your hunger for Jesus. It's about overcoming a craving that says you have these cravings for the things of the world, but you really need to hunger for God. In his book, Hunger for God, John Piper writes this: the greatest adversary of love to God is not his enemies, but his good gifts. Listen to this. And the most deadly appetites are not for the poison of evil, but for the simple pleasures of earth. For when these replace an appetite for God himself, the idolatry is scarcely recognizable and almost incurable. Therefore, when I say that the root of Christian fasting is the hunger for God, what I mean is that we will do anything and go without anything if by any means we might protect ourselves from the deadening effects of innocent delights and preserve our longing for God. And this is the essence of why one would fast.